All right. Well, Tom, and looking at resources, we had so many people come to Facebook and give us the resources that have actually, again, my perspective was not just something that was good that they were excited about, inspired them a little bit, but what actually gave value to their lives. Cause I think we all have that. We have that book or we have that talk. It could be a TED talk. My gosh, these days, we have that conference, we have that person, a mentor, and people are referencing all those, but those resources that are kind of just top of the list. And for me, I mean, I have those things, and it's the ones that I bring up time and time again. We do that on the show a lot of times where we'll reference the same person, same message, same book overall. We've talked about people like Shanti Feldhahn, who we had on the show, who, her book on kindness, we talk about it consistently and it really impacted us. So that's what I was going for. I know you've got your own, probably a long list, but hopefully a short list of the ones that were really the most impacting to you.
Absolutely. My list is fairly short, and that's because I'm always, I guess a spot on my list is what's new, what am I interested in, what is it that I don't know that I want to know more about, and I put that into my listening portfolio. But the regulars are, gosh, you know what? I There's a devotional that I do, His Utmost for My Highest, Oswald Chambers, every day. I read one book in the book of Proverbs, try to read that every day. And then there's some podcasts that I go back to over and over again. Rabbi Daniel Lappin, Freakonomics, some other things. So I think I'm kind of like most people. What about you, Kevin? What is it that you kind of dip your fingers into on a regular basis?
A real consistent one for me is Dallas Willard as an author. And he's got The Spirit of the Disciplines. I've got, what is the current book that I'm reading for the second time? I'll have to think about what the title is. But Dallas Willard, I consistently just go back and marinate on his books, usually during my devotion time. And that is a faith-based. Frederick Buechner as well, from a faith-based standpoint. Those are two guys that I read more than anyone. As far as a business, I mean, there's no book I've talked about, and we're gonna have a bunch of people that testify to it, than See You at the Top and How to Win Friends and Influence People. I mean, those are irreplaceable ones that I can just go back to time and time again and reorient myself. It's like the Bible says, renew your mind every day. And I can do those. I think that's what I'd love to read something and have it, boom, impact me. And I am a changed man from that day forward. And maybe I am a little bit, but I'm going to get, a fifth of the change that I could get if I kept going back and forth, which is what, again, in the show, we start off with Zig's talk about the guy who listened to Stay Motivated, 100 times or so. We've got Seth Godin, who talked about Secrets of Closing the Sale, that he listened to 72 times before the cassette tape died and he had to get a new one. So that's what I was really looking for from people. And it's interesting to hear some of the stuff that they testify to are the classic things that we know of, like some of those books, and some are new. So I hope this really equips people for some new resources to dig into, because these are ones that people actually testified to.
Awesome.
All right. Well, here, I'll start off with one. And I'm going to start off with podcasts. And admittedly, I'm asking Ziglar listeners what podcast they listen to. So what's one that they talk about a lot? The Ziglar Show. So I'm very honored. But even to hear what they say about it here, like Dennis Durrell, he says, the Ziglar Show has been a springboard to a large percentage of books that I've read. Often, once I find an author I like, it will spawn multiple reads of their books. Mark Batterson comes to mind as a recent example, and we had him on a show just recently. Other times, the show is the best part of the book, and I glean those parts and move on. But even the conversations between you and Tom bring a number of thoughtful insights. Standing alone, no one show or one book or anything has been the key. It's putting it together that knits together a paradigm of success that I absolutely use daily. And Tom, a lot of people said that. But he said this show is a catalyst, a force multiplier, if you will. And I'm very remiss not to include the True Life podcast, my other podcast, the True Life podcast. Those principles have added years to my life and made me weller. on the spectrum. I don't mean to come across as just a big fanboy, but the information, principles, and strategies presented have made such a huge difference in my life today. I'm honestly a better person, employee, husband, father, leader because of it. Well, how's that? That's thank you, Dennis, for that. I will say, as we're going to go down and talk through some podcasts that people listen to, that different than books, that is the benefit of the podcast, because you could tune in to the same person. And even if they're having different topics, different guests like we do, it's still the same thread or a similar thread of the spirit of how we come into these perspectives of personal development. Right, Tom?
Right. And, you know, I saw a pretty interesting little post on Facebook the other day, and it said this: if somebody's is the person who's criticizing you, and the context was social media, right? Because there's a lot of that going on right now. Is that someone who's criticizing you? Is that someone you would seek out for advice?
Mm.
And if the answer is no, then why are you letting it bother you that they're criticizing you? And so, what I want to speak to in that regard, kind of along a similar line, is I think it's awesome to get recommendations on books to read, but you've got to ask yourself, is the person who's recommending the book, is that someone who I would go to for advice? And that, to me, is, you know, the key thing that we say is we got to guard what we put in our mind. We got to choose our input. So you need to be careful of what you read, what you listen to, what paths you go down. And I think a lot of people, they like the Ziglar show because we're viewed as kind of a trusted resource, right? Because you do a lot of due diligence. I don't know. I think I send you somebody who's saying, hey, I want to be on the show maybe 2 or 3 times a week now. And you vet them, right? You vet them, because if they don't match up with the principles and values, then we don't want them on the show. And that's small. Okay. Let's be real. That's not a lot of people but some of them, they have great stuff. It's just not our audience. And so we vet them as well.
Yeah. I've got an agency that sends me a lot of personalities that's starting to do a background check on everybody and let us know what's happening. I'll tell you on that. That's interesting that you say that though, Tom, because if there's a podcaster out there that you're listening to a lot that is not somebody you would seek advice out of, you're listening to them for entertainment. And that's top of the list. Bottom line, if you go to iTunes and look at the top shows on planet Earth, the vast majority are entertainment. Even the personalities that are on there, and people say, oh, they do really interesting, neat interviews and whatnot. It's still entertainment because they're not people that you would go to for advice. So that's a great way to put that. And I'm not saying, entertainment. Hey, I like entertainment as well. But that's a great filter to put them through. Kathy Collins, she says, of course, our podcast, Zig Ziglar, and currently enjoying Ed Mylett, Mylett. He would be an awesome guest to interview. I've actually had a few people reference, and I know of him, and the guy does have a big podcast, big following, big influence, but he's not someone I've encountered personally.
I haven't either.
Andy here, she says, I'm an artist, so I listen to lots of art podcasts like the Art Angle, Versify, StoryCourse, Getty Museum, TED Art Talks, and Studio 360, and TED Radio Hour. TED is one that's such a phenomenon. The TED Talks. I went again and watched Simon Sinek's Start With Why, which I think is one of the top 3 all time. It has 50 some million just on the TED site. I think it has millions elsewhere, but that is another. They do such a great job of, now it's very formulaic. It's only 20 minutes. You've got to hit these different points. And Tom, I've gotten some great influence from TED Talks. They're so masterful.
Yes, they are. And what they do, the reason the formula works is it makes the presenter distill down their message into a stream that we can remember, that we can use, that just gets the nuggets out of it. And so you don't have to weed through the different things. One thing that they just said, which I thought was fantastic, is they said, I'm an artist, so I listen to art podcasts. I think there's a lot of people out there who never go to that next level of thinking, which is, what is it that I really want to do? And maybe it's a niche, maybe you're a high altitude farmer. I'm almost guaranteeing you that there's got to be some podcasts out there that specifically fulfill that. What a great way to build your repertoire, to build your knowledge.
It's interesting you say that, Tom. I had a meeting with a real estate company here in my area last week, and they're interested and wanted my counsel on starting a podcast just for this local audience. Even though any podcast can be listened to anywhere on planet Earth, and the Ziglar Show is listened to on about every country on planet Earth, there is more traction being had for local markets. So don't discount that if you speak to your local market, because for most people, that is the case. There's nobody speaking to them locally. Everything's global these days. Who's speaking locally? So this real estate company is going to start doing that, just speaking to a local market. So yeah, to your aspect of niche, and that's always an opportunity. Always an opportunity. Lori, she says, I'm a podcast junkie. I listen daily. Top of my list are ones providing real value. She says the True Life podcast. Achieve Your Goals with Hal Elrod. We had Hal on the show this year, and he has a real popular podcast, Achieve Your Goals. The Ziglar Show. Destined to Be. I'm actually not familiar with that one. But yeah, Achieve Your Goals. Hal Elrod is another one, very popular, very along lines. If you like the Ziglar Show, you're going to like his. Dion, and you say, I think his last name is Uy, is how you say it. He's from Malaysia. He says, I learned a lot and am getting triggered on wellness to get weller by the True Life podcast. And Dion, Tom, you'll appreciate this. He is the gentleman in Malaysia that hired me to come out and be their keynote speaker for an event that was postponed because of COVID. So
I know I've actually had a couple of interactions with him.
okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. Yep.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
And it's funny. I really love the term weller that he talked about. I know that's a theme.
Yep.
And that's one of the valuable things that you can learn by reading or listening is, like a domino falls, and it's like, can I have perfect health? Probably not. Can I be weller? We all can be weller.
Yes.
And so that little shift gives us that permission to grow and go in that direction.
And I would say, of course, he's referencing our True Life podcast where we talk about that term, but that's, in every area of life. We're here at the Ziglar Show figuring out how can we be weller. And it's kind of that thing of we need to be content with what we have, but I don't know if we're to be ever satisfied and just coasting along. Victoria Warner, she says, I love podcasts. Yours, of course, the EntreLeadership podcast. And if you folks don't know that, that's in the Dave Ramsey franchise of podcasts. He probably has, I don't know, Tom, 6, 7 personalities. He's got his own podcast, of course, Dave Ramsey Show, which is one of the top on planet Earth, literally. And then he's got, within the fold, EntreLeadership, his daughter, Rachel Cruz, Christy Wright, Chris Hogan, Ken Coleman, who used to host the EntreLeadership podcast, now has his own, and they're all under the Ramsey label. You'll see the little R on there if you go into the business category. I think most of them are in business, but that's where EntreLeadership is. Victoria references the Jordan Harbinger show. Jordan's one of the current modern purveyors of how to win friends and influence people and what Ziglar is about. And we've had him on the show, I think, a couple of times. And then John Maxwell as well. And I think he has a podcast.
Yeah, he has a couple of things. He has the Maxwell Minute, which I'm not sure if that's a podcast or if that's a subscription. But, we're in the podcast area. But really, to me, more and more people don't know whether it's a podcast or a webinar or an online subscription or whatever. But to me, the choice is, okay, what audio am I going to put into my life?
Yeah.
Right. What am I going to do? And a lot of people I know love the flexibility of podcasts because you can do it while you're exercising, while you're driving, while you're doing other things.
Berna here, you'll appreciate this. She says, most beneficial to me is the Ziglar Show podcast. I've been reading and listening to some of the books suggested on the podcast. And I do know people appreciate that. Just about every personality I have on the show is an author, has a book. And I do that on purpose. I want them to have a resource. So if you like what you hear, you can engage with them further. But Berna here, she says, I'm also with Mary Kay Cosmetics. And Mary Kay trainings have been a huge part of my personal growth. And we talked on there a bit because about the fact that Zig was such a part of, I mean, he was kind of their primary go-to personality, wasn't he?
Way back in the day. So we're talking in the 70s, in the early 70s. Just a quick Mary Kay story because I love it. Mary Kay's from Dallas, and she was building the business, and it was being very, very successful. And one of their groups asked Dad to go and speak, and so he spoke for this group. Didn't realize that Mary Kay was there. When he was done, she wanted to meet with him, and she said, "Zig, I'm going to recommend that all of our directors have you come in and speak to their organizations. Now, the financial arrangement will be between you and the director because everybody's independent, but I'm going to recommend it." And then she said, "And I'm going to recommend you do a full day workshop for them." Well, Dad had never done a full day workshop. It was mainly, just keynotes and half days and things like that. So he created that full day workshop, and the outline for that full day workshop turned into the book, See You at the Top.
That's excellent.
And so that's kind of where our heart goes when we think Mary Kay. That invitation and that ask and that kickoff really started creating kind of what we know as Zig Ziglar today. And then when Dad tried to get the book published, nobody would take it. I think he got turned down over 20 times. Mary Kay, I guess, called him and said, "Hey, Zig, I hear your book's coming out." And he said, "Well, I'm not sure when because nobody will publish it. I'm going to have to self-publish it." And she said, "Don't worry about it. I'll buy your first 5,000 copies." And so we owe a big debt of gratitude to that organization. So let's talk about, since we're talking about resources, let me talk about what Mary Kay is. Mary Kay is not a cosmetics company. They're actually a people development company. That's what they do. So women and people who join Mary Kay, a lot of times they're joining because they need the opportunity. They need a little bit more money. They're put in a lot of times they're in an uncomfortable situation where they got to do something. They got to hustle, and they think they're going to go out and sell cosmetics. And instead they enter into a community of people, and their leaders build them up and give them the confidence to stand up in front of the group and train and develop, and they learn all these other skills. And so that is just another testimony to when you choose the right input, whether it's by association, a company like Mary Kay or somebody else, it changes your life.
Well, and to me, I mean, it's an organization. How many people have been heavily influenced by an organization, whether it's Mary Kay or Weight Watchers or something of that nature. And I'm going to put that into the mentor category. Let me read just a handful that came in here. Jeff, he says, the most powerful resource, meaningful conversations with mentors I trust. Brian Lynchard, he says, a coaching mastermind group that I've been in as a Christian, and scrolling through the answers above that were posted in here on my own. I think it's sad that the church in general is not doing a better job to help people grow and improve. In my opinion, the church should be the number one answer to a question like this, which, interestingly enough, when I asked this question, nobody did say the church, Tom, which is a bit of a sad, disappointing commentary. Dan Brandenburg, he says, a mastermind and small discussion groups. These things create an energy around everyone involved. When surrounded by like-minded folks, I simply grow. It's easy for us to get stuck in our own heads, and those around who aren't on a similar journey, then it's easy to get lost. And then one more, Nate Scott, he says, I've really found that talking to others is big right now. Before, my superiors were focused before they were focused on the future, but now, and I think he's talking about our current pandemic, they seem to be looking internally for answers and ways moving forward. From talking, I've gained more value on my team and a lot of helpful tips for being successful when I move up. Just again, a great call out to mentors. And we talked about this recently in a show, Tom, of you can get teaching guidance from these outside sources, which I'm going to say like books, like podcasts, like whatever. But when we talk mentors, I at least have been defining that lately as these are people who it's actually are involved with you and can impart that wisdom and guidance to you specifically in your specific circumstances. So even though I want to say that Dallas Willard, I talked about him a minute ago, that he's, a mentor. Well, not really. He's a teacher and a guide, but he's no longer alive, and I never met the guy. So he never personally mentored me. And I don't know if that's fair to say, because I don't want to take away somebody's feeling of having a mentor that's far away, but it's different. These people are all talking about masterminds and discussion groups and mentors that they're personally involved with.
Yeah. Mentorship is, Bob Bodine, who we've had on a couple of times, just amazing. And he wrote The Power of Who, and he talks about how we need a real friend. And I can't remember if I got this statistic from him, but well over 70% of men who make what we call a catastrophically bad moral decision wouldn't have made it if they'd had one true friend.
Wow.
Right. In other words, somebody who's holding you accountable, someone who you can lay your heart to and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. I don't know what to do here. And the true friend would say, oh, we need to stay away from that. Let me help. What can we do? But because there is no true friend, there is no friendship, there is no accountability, then our mind's a pretty scary place to go, alone. And we can end up making pretty bad decisions.
Yeah.
A little bad decision that grows into a medium-sized bad decision that ends up being catastrophic. And so mentors and that type of relationship is so powerful. That's what I love about being a coach, is walking with people and seeing them grow. And it's a two-way street. I just thinking about one of the books that I read recently was Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. Mm-hmm. And he told the story, and a lot of listeners, you've read the book or you've heard it, but 60% of professional hockey players from Canada are born in January, February, March, or April. It's crazy, right? It's a crazy thought. Why does that happen? Well, it happens because the hockey league starts in January. And so a child who's born January 1 will play hockey against another child who was born 8 or 10 months later. And when you're 6 years old, 10 months of development and dexterity and eye-hand coordination is a huge advantage.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is what happens. So they're bigger, they're faster, they're a little bit more coordinated. So they get to play more games, right? They get to start. And now when they're starting and playing more games, they gain more experience. And then when it comes time to pick the select team, who do the coaches pick? Mm-hmm. The best players. So now they move to another level of select. Their competition's better, and they're playing even more games against better competition, and they go to tournaments. And because they're on a select team, they get better coaching. And so this happens year over year over year, so much so that 60% of professionals are born in the first, 30% or 25% of the, 33% of the year. So what does this mean? Well, Kevin, you and I have the same statistical advantage. Because we're doing a podcast like this, we get first crack at the experts who are innovating and laying the foundation. We've got an unfair built-in advantage because people come to us because they want the platform, or we go to them and they're happy to share. And so when you're talking with an author, you might be talking about the last book that they wrote, and a lot of times they're talking about the new research they're doing. And so when you are thinking about digging into a resource that can help you, this is another reason why you want to pick a mentor, a thought leader, an expert in your category, because they're getting the cutting edge information ahead of everybody else. Kind of like the accidental coincidence of being born in January versus October gives you the built-in advantage to being a professional hockey player.
We had Guy Kawasaki. We did one of these lives with him recently, and he talked about that. It's why he's so investing himself in podcasting, because he's been in the past been an author, authored books. But he says, and especially for him, who's commenting on the current landscape in business often, he says, man, if I publish a book, if I go after a book, I'm going to write this stuff, and it's going to be a year, year and a half, 2 years later that it comes out. And by then the landscape's changed. He said, I love podcasting because I get to talk about what's happening right now. I hadn't thought about that in that reference. So obviously, if you're talking personal development, it's more of an evergreen topic, and some business principles, of course, too. But yeah, what you're saying, you're totally right. We're getting the up-to-date right now, current information from people and benefiting from that. And my gosh, in a culture like we have today where things seem to change hourly, that's beneficial. I hadn't thought about it.
There's, and let's just talk about a huge trend with the pandemic. For close to over 3 months now, all the physical bookstores in a lot of markets were completely closed. So all the publishers, all the big publishing houses that make their money by shipping tens of thousands of books to bookstores, their distribution channel was shut down. Well, there's Amazon. Amazon comes out and says, we're overwhelmed, so we are gonna focus on essentials.
Yep.
Right? Food, medicine, or anything else that's kind of like survival stuff. And so even the book sales other than electronic on Amazon were extremely curtailed. In the meantime, somebody like me, I wrote 2 mini books during the first 2.5 months of the pandemic. So both of them about 60 pages. They're the free little ebooks. Kevin, put them in the show notes, and that way people can get them. But we actually went to the publisher and said, hey, you know what? Do you want to do get this book out right now, because it's for now? And their business model just isn't set up for this. And so what's going to happen, interestingly, is there's going to be a wave of books that come out that are a year to 6 months to over a year delayed because of all the pent up stuff that's happening. So it's crazy. So Kiyosaki's saying, hey, we gotta, the podcast gives me what I need to know now. That's what we've got to understand. And for everybody listening, what you want to make sure is that you have a filter that you trust. Because there's never been more noise in the universe than right now. And so I think that's why we're hearing it over and over again. The podcast listeners are saying, hey, I like the podcast because I trust what direction you point me. And so, maybe the question isn't what book do I need read next? Maybe my question is, okay, who are 5 people I really trust? And what do they say I should read or listen to?
It's great counsel. And you talk about a filter. We've got one right here. Obviously, the show is a filter. As you said, we vet everybody and bring on the messages that we think are fitting for this audience. So let's just dive into books right now as a filter. Talk about that, because so many of the books here are ones that you and I have read. We've advocated. The first person here, Myth Kazisi, and I've got a lot of people from different places, and I don't know how to pronounce all their names, but references the 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. So folks, this is show 798. We had him on show 781, really on personal mastery. And the book was written in a fiction form. So this person also references the book, The Alchemist, another one. I didn't write down the author of that, but that's one of the, that book has become a classic, ultimately, The Alchemist. And let's see, the manuscript found in Accra by Paul Colho. I don't know how you say that last name. I know the author, but I don't know that guy, Paul Cole, I think it's Colho, and Robin Sharma both have multiple books. Robin has The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, The Leader Who Had No Title, that are all done in that. Don't we refer to them as an allegorical, aspect? I mean, they're taking true principles, but they're putting them in story form, which is a format I don't generally gravitate towards, but I did enjoy Robin Sharma's 5 a.m. Club. Matter of fact, the people who are watching the video, I think I've got 6 copies behind me. So there you go. Jeff Bayless here. He says, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I mean, that's got to be top 10, if not higher on that one. Matter of fact, so many people testified to it. I realized it reminded me that I've misplaced my copy. So I went and ordered another one. But this is a guy in a concentration camp who realizes that the only thing that he can control is himself. And it's an incredible read. It's a short read. But yeah, it's got to be up there and top of the top list. If you haven't read that, if you're hearing this now and haven't read it, go get Man's Search for Meaning.
Yep. And that was a big influence on Dad. That book, Norman Vincent Peale's books were a big influence on him. And so I'll give everybody a hack that I discovered in college. So if you're in college and you are having to write a paper, this is a great way to come across far more intelligent than you might actually be. The teacher would give us assigned reading in textbooks, right? And so what I would do is I would then read those sources and find out what sources they were giving credit for. And then I would quote those secondary sources in my papers. And the reason I did that is because I wanted the professor to know that I was interested in this and I wanted to find out what the original source said. Now, if you find somebody who is kind of a guru of today, very influential, do the same thing. I'm sure most of them will have published what books influenced them the most. Go and read those sources. And that'll give you insight into the foundation of what that person is believing.
And we should just make up a basket of, if you want to improve yourself, business, personal, whatever, here are your top tier books as testified by book sales over the course of time, and the people, the modern day leaders and influencers who still cite those books. You just mentioned Norman Vincent Peale. His book, The Power of Positive Thinking, is an absolute, top 10. But you look at, the Power of Positive Thinking, Man's Search for Meaning, How to Win Friends and Influence People, See You at the Top, Secrets of Closing the Sale. And Secrets of Closing the Sale, again, I've said this 100 times, I'll keep saying it. That's a book that Seth Godin didn't read that 72 plus times because it was just about sales. It's about much more than that. But again, looking at those books, that would be I'm sure somebody's done that. If we searched enough, somebody did a survey of top leaders and what are those top shelf books. I just told you a handful of them. Kathy Collins, she says, The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, and his books were referenced a lot. He was the editor of
Success Magazine.
Success Magazine. Okay. And has gone on. Now he's just an incredibly well-known author and speaker and personality.
One of my good friends, Kyle Wilson, has a new podcast, and he has 3 episodes with Darren Hardy.
Oh, excellent.
And it is fantastic. One of the best 3-part podcasts I've ever heard. Kyle is a gifted marketer and questioner. He does his research, and he's known Darren for over 20 years. And Darren doesn't do interviews. He doesn't do podcast interviews. And so if you want to get Darren on an interview, this will be one of the only places you'll find it. And that's Kyle Wilson's.
I was going to say, I haven't had Darren on the show. Maybe that's why. I don't know that I asked, but he was referenced multiple times. You Can't Hurt Me. That's a book by David Goggins. That guy has hit the limelight in a big way. I've seen him on more videos and shows and podcasts. I don't know if he has a podcast or not, but that book, You Can't Hurt Me, he was a Navy SEAL, I believe. Is that right? Yeah. And has become a big name in a short time, it seems like. Allison Arneberg, she says, for her, it was counseling, going and getting counseling. But within that, there were books around the topic she went to get counseling. Codependent No More. It's a book I'm aware of. I didn't look up the author, but Codependent No More, I think, is a pretty classic.
Is that Steve Otterburn?
I don't know. Somebody else. Well,
that's a great book. That's a great book.
So you're familiar with that? Yeah, I didn't look that up. Let's see here. It's a quick Google search away, and I'm not finding it. There's one by Melody, looks like Beatty, as well. Codependent No More. I'm not sure if it's just that's the only book. Um, she says, I also recently read Genius Books, which has completely changed my view and relationship with food in regards to brain health. And that's one that I'm aware of as well. Napo here, he says, does the Bible count? The book of Proverbs is a great base. And I said, absolutely, the Bible counts. Brent Krull, he said, the book of James, which is within the Bible. I mean, we could go off on that for quite a while. There's very few, as Solomon in the Bible said, nothing new under the sun. I don't know if there's anything of value in personal development and self-help that's ever been written that we can't trace back to the Bible.
Yep. James, by the way, is my favorite book in the Bible. So, and I read a proverb every day. So those are my go-tos.
Well, here's a one from Caleb Miller. That's my son. He said, definitely the Ziglar Show and the True Life Show. I'm so honored. Anybody have a 25-year-old kid who would listen to their podcast? You can, that's humbling for sure. But he also, his books, and these are, I know these books impacted his life, A Million Miles in 1,000 Years and Scary Close, both by Donald Miller. And I forgot to look up the episode. We've had Donald on the show, I think twice. I think we had him on in regards to that book, A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. And then we had him on later from a business focus for his book, Story Brand as well. But the book Scary Close that my son references there is one of the more impacting books for me from a personal standpoint. So incredible, but A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. I had an organization quite a few years ago, and we gave that book to every new member because it was so powerful about, he really goes into, looking at your life like a movie. Is it anything that anyone would be interested in? Are you interested in your life? And just a convicting book for sure. Caleb cites Get Your Life Back. That's a recent book by John Eldridge, who we've had on the show in the past as well. And the book I've Seen the End of You by Dr. Lee Warren, who we had on the show this year in 2020, was incredibly impacting to him. Thomas Zelensky, I taught the Dale Carnegie course. He says, and also How to Win Friends and Influence People. Dale Carnegie, I mean, that was back, when was that? Early 1900s, 1930s?
30s, 40s, 50s.
Something like that.
So Thomas, my dad was a Dale Carnegie instructor for a while. So you're in good company.
And I got to audit as a kid, as a wallflower, my dad going through the Dale Carnegie classes. Yeah, anything Dale Carnegie, man, is going to do you well. Wendy Trisher, she says, The Magic of Thinking Big and Napoleon Hill. That book, again, Magic of Thinking Big, it's got to be, I'm going to say top 10. I can't say that more than 10 times, I guess, but I don't know how it can't be there.
You're still good. You're still good.
All right. Marianne Schutt, she says, The Dance of Anger by Harriet Lerner is a fantastic book for women. I bought copies for many friends and they all had big aha moments from reading it. That's a book, again, it's popular enough that I absolutely know the name. Have not read it, but I know the name. Marvin Pinnock, he says, Clifton Strengths. Now, folks, if that's confusing, that's the Strengths Finder. A lot of people know Strengths Finder 2.0, written by Tom Rath. We had him on in show 353, though we talked about his book called Fully Charged in that episode. But Strengths Finder is what she's talking about. And yeah, I'm not sure how the publishing has happened, but it's now called Clifton Strengths. But yeah, very powerful book that comes along. It's a companion with, in essence, a personality profile.
Yep.
Terry Johnson says, so many books and wonderful podcasts, but Mel Robbins' The 50-Second Rule has really impacted him. And Tom Ziglar's Choose to Win and Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. Well, there's three good ones. Mel Robbins has become a very well-known author. But yeah, folks, if you haven't, and I should have pulled it out, the episode that we did with you, Tom, on Choose to Win, but you can find that as you go through. Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren has sold 20 million copies, something ridiculous. Seems like last time I heard.
Something ridiculous.
Something ridiculous. Purpose-Driven Life. And then there was the variations of that. purpose-driven business, and I don't even know how many. Archie Winningham, God's Way is the Best Way. I love that little book, written and lived out by Zig. Folks, if you go to Ziglar.com, hit the online store, go to books, they'll find that book there, correct?
God's Way is still the best way. Yep.
Okay. Nate Schwartzentruber, Og Mandino, The Greatest Salesman. That's got to be top 20. Og Mandino's, I mean, that's one, gosh, I knew it from a young age. How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie. How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success, Frank Betker. I'm familiar with that title. I don't think I've read the book, Tom.
I read the first two on there, but not that one. And
Andy Andrews, A Traveler's Gift. That is one that I don't know how many they've sold, but the amount of influencers that I know that cite that book is profound. I almost wonder if it's kind of a under the radar bestseller. Andy Andrews is he's influenced so many influencers. So we had him on the show, 351, episode 351, and it was on one of his books. I don't think it was on that. It was on a different one. But yeah, he has been so influential. It feels like the people who love him. My parents, Dan and Joanne Miller, know him and are huge fans of his book. And again, he writes in that allegorical scenario. I don't know if it's all his books, but most of them.
Most of them. He's written others. He wrote, I think it was How to Kill 11 Million People, which is a crazy title.
That is.
And he's actually, if you get the audio recording of Dad's last book, Born to Win, Andy is the voice on that book.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So I got to spend 2 days with Andy in a studio when he read that book. Just an amazing guy. One of the most powerful pictures the most powerful picture I've ever had. Andy was the inspiration behind it. And it's the picture of Dad and I walking away from the camera holding hands.
Oh, right.
Right. Andy witnessed that scene and he made me get a picture that way. And Cindy took that picture. So just a great human being, amazing communicator. Yeah. And so if you know more about Andy, he looked at Dad as his dad, like his father figure, his mentor. And so there's so many, I heard John Maxwell say, well, if it hadn't been for Zig, I wouldn't be doing the speaking. I'd still be preaching. Dave Ramsey, has said, hey, if it wasn't for Zig, who knows? And Seth Godin, hey, my first company, you would have never heard of Seth Godin if it hadn't been for Zig. And so that's why it's for everybody, it's so important. The people who influence so many people, who influenced them in the beginning? Because boy, when you can hear it, the root as well as the interpretation, boy, that's just as Darren Hardy would say, that's a compound effect.
Yeah. Yep. Well, here, let me just run through a few outside. We've hit podcasts. We've had books. Some folks just responded. Frank Redivide, he says, I skip around from the focus of fitness and self-development, business, finance, and spiritual. I feel like if I don't invest in all those, everything falls apart. He says, however, he says, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl is one he read recently. It's powerful. It gave me insight to how powerful meaning in life can truly be. The beginning of the book, he says, was difficult, but as he then described his experience in survival in 4 concentration camps and how he derived meaning in his suffering, it was so powerful. Jennifer Stone, she says, number one for her is getting outdoors. Hiking to summits daily helps her mind and body in so many ways. And we talk about these different ingredients, but sometimes that can open us up for the personal development to take root. She does say, and I did want to reference this because we have so many business people, so many realtors, even in our audience. She says, I highly recommend the book Ninja Selling by Larry Kendall. And I had been referenced that book by a friend. He says, man, I know you're not in real estate, Kevin, but you got to check this guy out. He says she says it's not only a wonderful read for the real estate industry, the book is perfect for anyone who wants to improve their business, their personal and professional relationships, their thought processes, behaviors, and how to positively connect with others. Again, we're talking about an organization. That's what I've heard here. Just like we talked about Mary Kay, it's an organization that's helping you face value in a specific area, but they're there to help you be a more successful human being overall. Here you go, Kenneth. Here's two, I think. Kenneth O'Neill, he says, I work daily in my Ziglar performance planner in all 7 areas of the wheel of life. I teach it to my academy prep students and participants in my drug and alcohol abuse program at the Salvation Army. Christine Apple, she says, this is my first year to use the Ziglar Performance Planner. It's helped tremendously, and I plan to continue using it every year. I used to think an electronic calendar was all I needed to log appointments, but this is a great tool to accomplish my goals and organize my life. And there were, I don't know if I'll get to it or if I skipped over it. People talked about journaling as well. But yeah, the Ziglar Performance Planner, again, if you go to Ziglar.com, hit the online store. Is it under books, Tom?
Yeah, you'll find it under the books. It's just in the online store, and I'll show you what it looks like. Here's mine.
For the Facebook folks checking it out, there's your performance planner. And this is paper and pen, and it's going through daily and getting your priorities in order, reframing your goals. Well, you can give it a quick description, Tom, but the people who use that thing testify to it as a lifeline for the success in their life.
So there's 2 main uses for it. The first one is it's a goals tracker. So it teaches you the process of setting a complete goal, and then you write it down at the beginning of the week. So it's a 7 days, go across the page when you open it up. And you write the 4 goals that you're going to focus on for the week. And then every day you just track your progress. And then I like to put in my meaningful appointments in there. So a meaningful appointment to me is a conversation with someone. It could be a sales call, it could be a speech, could be a podcast recording. I write those in. And then as I write them in, I kind of envision, okay, what do I want to happen at that time? And, you've heard it. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Or if you don't know what the ingredients are, how could you bake the cake? And so if you're trying to accomplish things in your life, there is no more powerful way to do it than to do it on paper, and the planner makes it easy. So it's an amazing tool to get things done and to get them done quicker and faster than you thought possible.
Yeah. Well, Greg Gerber here, he says, I found Darren Hardy's Insane Productivity course to be exceptionally practical, no bull teaching to help accomplish all the big goals without sacrificing quality of life. We mentioned Darren Hardy before, and I'll mention right along with that, Ashley Logston, that's my sister. She references thework.com. She says it was a complete game changer for me to learn to shift my thinking and flip the script. It's the official website for the work of Byron Katie, which is actually a lady. And we had a few people testify to her. I was not familiar with her, but I'm going to pull both of those out as courses. I was actually surprised we didn't have more people cite courses or of that nature, but here's a couple there. And I feel like my personal testimony from people is that those are as powerful or more than anything else. Courses and events are the big game changers for many. I'm surprised we didn't have more references to them in this thread. Alan Thomas, he says, it's a loose leaf notebook that came with 2 CDs that I purchased for $96 from a guy in Franklin, Tennessee. You may have heard of him, Kevin, Dan Miller. I said, totally rings a bell. He says, I actually found the original transaction in my personal finance software from May 2004. The impact over the following year was epic. And so he's referencing the early self-publication of 48 Days to the Work You Love by Dan Miller, my father. That's a great testimony too, to not having to have something perfect to get it out there. We're probably in a little more competitive light these days because there is the option to go out there and self-publish one by one on Amazon or whatever. And so pretty much everything looks nice, but it's neat to see that. We had somebody else say, man, my favorite is those old school Zig Ziglar the cassette tapes as well.
I can remember. I can remember back in the day, Kevin, Dad would teach Sunday school, and they would record it, and then they would duplicate cassette tapes. And 15 minutes after he was done, you could go get your cassette tape.
Yes, I remember that.
And they were $1. I mean, you could basically, for the cost of the tape, you could take it home. And there are people all over the world who have boxes of those things.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And there's so many, I'm skipping down through so many that just say Zig Ziglar, see you at the top. Zig Ziglar, see you at the top over and over. Secrets of Closing the Sale. Obviously we have a Ziglar audience here, but that is why we are here with the Ziglar Show that's had 47 million downloads, is because of that life-changing content. A couple more here. Jessica, she says the ones that work are the ones that I actually apply to my life. There's the Bible, number one, and then Zig. We have the complete set and the current Ziglar Show. Well, thank you. And it's, you know what, speaking on that again, if you want, I probably don't mention this enough. If you want a great library, not the library, but a great library of Zig Ziglar content, still is the best. What's the best resource on the Ziglar site, Tom?
You know, if you want like the classic Zig Ziglar audio, I would go and get How to Stay Motivated. You can get it at Ziglar.com, and you can either get it in hard copy CD or you can get it digitally. And so you'll get the files you can download, put on your phone. That is over 20 hours of attitude, motivation, personal development, self-image, and goal setting. And it's just, it's the bread and butter. So if you like See at the Top book, if you like, any Over the Top, any of the Top Performance, any of the books that he wrote, and you want it all on audio, and he recorded them in front of live audiences, which give it a lot of energy. Those are it. We've sold more of that one than any other program we've ever had.
Well, you know what? It'd be a good place to wrap up right on there, Tom, and just saying that I know it's exciting to get new material, to listen to the next guest, to read the next book. That's great. It keeps our hope and inspiration on fire. But people attesting to change almost always comes from the repeat. And so to think about that, to think about what are the shows here on the Ziglar Show that have been the most influencing to you. Maybe don't listen to the next few new ones. Go listen to that one again, or add it to your list and listen to it over and over. Whatever books it was, go read it again. Take it this time with a pen and a journal. Do something different, or type it, or whatever. Get it into your noggin again and again. Whatever that audio is that really influenced you, that TED Talk, that conference, whatever, go do it again. We're in a habit culturally, and I'm part of it. I suffer from it too, of wanting the next new thing instead of, so we hear and gain some knowledge, but we don't really learn and change.
That's right. Dad used to teach, you got to listen to it at least 17 times before you really know it.
Yep. I remember hearing that recently, or most recently, from Mark Timms, one of his sons, who said it was when we were at the event in Nashville, and he had a son there who said he was at that point going through some of the Ziglar material 17 times because he heard that. Biscuits, Fleas, and Pump Handles. There you go.
Was the audio recording that I think it was Marcus.
Okay.
Who listened to it. And that's free too. If you go to Ziglar.com, we have free gifts there. And that's a download you can get for free. So, hey, go load up your library with Dad's most famous speech, Biscuits, Fleas, and Pump Handles, which is free.
There you go. Go get it. Listen to it 17 times. All right. Thanks for all the input here. What a great list. Tom, thanks, brother.
Thanks, brother.